Hey, everybody. I'm Lisa Campion, and this is the Miracle of Healing. We're so glad that you're here. If you've been following the show for a while, welcome back. If you're new, you jumped into a really good one. I'm so excited about this guest today because this conversation has really close to home for me. As a recovering people pleaser myself, I'm super happy to welcome in Tonya Lester. She is a Brooklyn-based psychotherapist, a writer, the author of a brand new book, which is living on my bedside table right now, called Pushback: Live, Love, and Work with Others Without Losing Yourself. In today's conversation, we're diving into why so many women suppress their own needs without even realizing that they're doing that, and what it means to be the good kind of difficult, and how speaking up is actually a profound act of self-care. We'll talk about overfunctioning, people pleasing, perfectionism as anxiety in disguise, and how to tell the difference between raging, collapsing, and genuinely pushing back and holding our own boundaries. And it's so difficult. I find this quite difficult. So I'm really glad to talk about it. And welcome to the show, Tonya.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you got here. Like what I always like to start with people's backstory a little bit. So share with us a little about how you got here to the stage of your journey.
I've been a therapist for 20 years, and I was seeing in my office over and over again women coming in with their husbands, and really they had sort of had it. Like they felt like they had spoken up, but nothing was changing. He wasn't hearing them. And then in the office, sometimes they would really be to the point where they'd be like, I'm done. I'm finished with this marriage. And he would actually be shocked. And the truth is he shouldn't have been shocked. He should have seen this coming a mile away. But it was like her reaction had never kind of elevated to a level that he was kind of really needed to hear her, where he was shaken up a little bit. And I would think, why is this always happening? And then at the same time, my sister, who I'm very close to, and she's a very competent, successful person. She's a great mom. She is the executive director of a big health organization, like a total rock star. And she had silenced herself so much in her marriage, really to the point that I know all her closest people were a little bit like, how did this happen to you? Like that you're so empowered and that you'd become so small in your marriage. And then at the same time, I had a real wake up call in my own marriage of feeling like, oh, I'm really unhappy. And I could see that I was making the mistakes my sister is making and making the mistakes that my clients were making. And even though I could teach this, I wasn't doing it in my life. And it really was kind of a cold water in the face about how entrenched these issues are and the socialization is around some of these issues for women. So I decided to write the book.
Thank you. Thank you for writing the book so much and for talking about this. And how did we get here? Like, how do we end up in a place where super powerful women or any woman feels so silenced and doesn't know how to sort of voice and take a stand for their own needs?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple of factors, but primarily socialization and this idea that as women, as partners and mothers, our main job is to maintain harmony, and that any disruption is stressful, is something we can't tolerate emotionally, and that we're failing. Like if we have kind of if there's upset in the system, that it's our fault and that we need to jump into it and soothe everything. And the term I use in the book and in my practice is shock absorbing. Like we will throw our bodies in front of any disruption for other people in order to cushion the blow. And you cannot maintain harmony all the time and have a voice in your relationship. It's impossible. So healthy conflict is a real thing. And I think many of us, men and women, are not taught how to do that. And so what I see happen instead is that a woman will have a request and she'll say it very, very quietly. And then the male partner won't agree or won't like the request. And he'll be like, no. And then they just move on. And because that's it, he feels like it wasn't that big of a deal. And she feels kind of smacked down and like she's not allowed to express needs. And then it just builds over time and resentment really builds. So I think, and then exacerbated quite a bit. Corinne Lowe, who's a behavioral economics professor. She wrote a book called Having It All. And she talks about how, the women entering the workplace was supposed to be met with men doing way more at home, like 50%. Like it was all supposed to be even, but it hasn't been even. Like that isn't what has happened. And so women are under a lot of strain typically and taking on too much. And something has to give. And often it's her. So
that's so interesting. And I noticed sort of in the feminine sphere, if there is such a thing, that there's sort of a tendency to blame men here, to be like, what's wrong with all the these narcissistic men that show up. But maybe it's more of that is true. Also true, I think, but maybe it's more of the women have to rise back into power in some way that they got left out of it. What do you think about that?
I think you definitely have to try. I mean, I think if you want to stay married, you should try amplifying your concerns. And then you see, the truth is we talk so much about narcissistic men, and there are narcissistic men. There's also narcissistic women. And if you're with a narcissist, it's going to be very hard to heal the relationship unless the narcissistic partner really, really wants to. But there's also a lot of self-centered men, and that is not the same thing. And that, again, is because of socialization. And these men, and I would count my own husband, not that he's not just self-centered, he has many wonderful qualities, but I would count him as someone who kind of operated like his own dad did, was more involved with our kids than his dad had been, and thought he was fine, thought he was doing great. And when I kind of burst his bubble around that, when I was really, really clear with my unhappiness, he adjusted. And I think that can happen. Now, it doesn't always happen, but I think if you want to stay married, why not give it your best shot? And then you'll know. If you really lay it all on the table, if you're not afraid of healthy conflict, if you're leaning into communication, if you're working hard and he will just not meet you, well, that's very, very important information to have. But you don't know. This is really giving it a shot. This is really pushing back, being the good kind of difficult, making your needs known, and where if someone has to grapple with you in the way that you're grappling with them.
Yeah. And I think even if the current relationship doesn't work out, it's probably a pattern that needs breaking in you
100%.
regardless, because otherwise you're just going to go into another relationship and repeat the pattern. So I always feel like it's kind of like the reps we're doing, in that relationship, regardless of the outcome, is going to benefit us either way.
I agree. Right? Showing up the way we want to show up in the world is never a bad thing, right? It's never too early to do that, and it's never too late to do that. And I completely agree that whatever happens with this relationship, you can start immediately showing up the way you want to show up in all of your relationships.
Yeah. So let's talk about the good kind of difficult, because that seems like an oxymoron, and I'm so fascinated with it. So what is that? What does that mean?
As someone who's a woman who's not afraid to make other people sometimes uncomfortable, perhaps, or unhappy, maybe, when she brings her needs up. Someone who is not always taking responsibility for the harmony in every situation. So to me, the good kind of difficult is speaking up, being honest, not being cruel. I mean, you can be kind, but it's being willing to rock the boat in service of being known and true emotional intimacy. Because one piece I think does get left out is it's a fake relationship. If you're going around not creating any waves, and the people around you, not just romantic partners, but your kids, your own parents, people you work with, they don't know you. So it's a false relationship. So if we want actual closeness, we have to be a little bit difficult because we want to be seen. We want to be known. And we aren't known unless we're honest. And sometimes honesty, if it rubs up against someone else's truth, it will create some friction. But that doesn't have to be a bad, scary thing.
Wow. Yeah, as you're talking about this, I really feel like there's some like nervous system regulation requirements here, and I know for myself, conflict can feel like, and this, goes back to my own childhood with a narcissistic parent, um, can feel like sort of life or death. It's very nervous system triggery for me. And I think probably there's some nervous system repair and regulation that needs to happen. I know that's been true for me. In order to come out of people pleaser mode and take a stand for myself, I have to do that. I have to regulate
Yes.
myself.
Yeah. I talk about this a lot in the book, and I feel like it's kind of a number one focus
Mm,
of my practice as well, is our nervous systems will really hijack the whole operation. Like your nervous system will definitely shut this down.
yeah.
So then how do you regulate it? In a difficult conversation, you can slow everything down. That's actually the best way to do that. Like a runaway train will always be derailed. So
Mm,
we need to slow down these interactions. You can plan, and I have some formulas for this, of like writing down what you're going to say ahead of time so that you're really, really clear. I'm a big believer in setting the stage before you're going to have a hard conversation. Like I want to set aside some time to talk that we can both focus, and then you can read what you wrote. Like, yes, the nervous system is a major player and is soothed by a plan. It's
mm,
soothed by a plan. And
yeah.
the truth of is, if you're really afraid of someone, that's something you should pay attention to. If you're saying like, no, this really isn't the other person, this is me, then I have lots of ways in the book to address that.
Right. Yeah, good point. If you're really afraid of somebody, that's a crucial data point,
Crucial data.
to take in there. Yeah. You
Yeah.
know what I notice? I'm in my 60s and I notice a lot of women my age who have just given up on this. It's like they are choosing isolation, singlehood, as a lifestyle rather than entangling themselves in relationships again because it feels like um, easier to be on your own than it is to go back into the fray, kind of back into the, these patterns. And I'm wondering if you notice that as well.
100%. I mean, I think I absolutely notice that. I think it's great that it's an option. And, I have heard over and over from women who decided to leave their partners that the love just poured in their life from other sources, right? Romantic love is not our only source of connection, and have been able to really deepen connections with other family members or their friends. And I think that is beautiful and wonderful. I don't think, if it's out of this idea that I just don't have the skills, that I feel like, okay, well, we can learn some new skills no matter how old we are. So being single is great. There's nothing wrong with deciding not to partner up. You just want to, I guess, be
Right.
curious with yourself if it's really about fear or a sense of hopelessness, or if it's really about, no, I am the most grounded, truthful, authentic version of myself when I'm on my own. I can definitely understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more like a conscious choice you're making because that choice feels good for you, to you,
Mhm.
versus I don't have the skills, so I'm just going to avoid it and isolate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm,
100%. Yeah.
wow. So let's talk a little bit about, anxiety and how you talk about anxiety, sort of the baseline emotion underneath. And that goes back to our conversation about nervous system regulation. Um, the sort of baseline experience beneath all these sort of adaptive strategies that we choose, like people pleasing or perfectionism, shock
Mhm.
absorbing, all those things. Like, how are we so anxious and what do we do about it?
I think we're so anxious because we really have too much on our plate without enough support and help often. And that the standards we are held to in society it's too high. It's absolutely too high. And I talk a lot about in the book how we're supposed to show up as it's crazy, like kind of perfectly maintained physically all the time at every kid's sporting event, killing it at work, having a home cooked meal. We even like the villainization of some outsourcing is like, that's all targeted at women, frustratingly, not as much by their male partners. If you have tons of childcare or help around the household. And I think it creates, and how I really experienced this when my kids were little, it was like this nervous revving in my stomach. It was like this engine that just propelled me to kind of get tighter and tighter and tighter around everything I was trying to do. And it really got it got out of hand. And I see this with people all the time. It's like, it does not have to be perfect. That's just anxiety. Someone being mad at you isn't always your problem to solve. If there's an apology, if you've hurt someone or made a big mistake, by all means, apologize. I'm not saying that, but an idea that every problem is yours to handle and solve, that's not true. And I think if we are walking through life feeling like it's a minefield of issues that we are supposed to deal with on our own, that produces a lot of anxiety. I'm anxious talking about it. So.
Oh my God, I got anxious talking about it too. Yeah. And I was a single mom through a lot of my kids, early life. So I think that sort of ratcheted up for me as well. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I got a little heart palpitation when you were talking. And I'm like, oh, we think we have to be like Martha Stewart, or we have, we have these sort of images, I think, that live in our mind about, like you said, the standards of what we're supposed to do. Like, but I don't think anybody can do that.
No, they can't, or something, or they're suffering in some way, and yeah. So to pour yourself into what you care about, if you're making beautiful meals every night because that's a hobby for you and you get a lot of enjoyment about it, do that. Of course, do that. But then don't worry about having, organized sock drawers, or don't worry about hiring someone to do the cleaning if you can afford it. Like pick the things that you like and let some of the other stuff, be mediocre is actually one of my slogans, especially when I'm starting something new, or if I have to focus on one thing, it's hard for me to let other things go. But I always say 50% is good enough.
I love that. That's so good. I think that's exactly what we want to, we want to aim for, because that perfectionism is really brutal.
It's brutal.
Now, if somebody is listening to this and you think they want to start, like, where's this sort of a gentle starting point where we can try to shift, besides reading your book, which obviously we're all going to do, but where can we start in an easy place with this?
Okay. So one thing I like to suggest to people is you can write a dread list. You can make a list of the relationships or situations that are making you most stressed out. And you just get it all down on paper. And then you can write next to each line item, you could say what the easiest first step would be towards resolving this in a way that works better for you. One of the frameworks I often offer in the book is I notice, I imagine, I feel, I need. It's a structure from Gestalt therapy that I like a lot. And you could say, if I was going to, and don't freak yourself out by being like, I'm going to write this, and then I have to say it. Like, take it easy on yourself. I'm just going to write it. I'm just going to see. Here's my guy now. I'm just going to write this and see how it goes. And you might be surprised when you write it out. It's not as inflammatory as it was in your head. It might be, I notice I've done pickup from soccer every time for the past 2 weeks. I imagine you're feeling like you're too busy at work, but it doesn't really look that way to me. I feel upset and overlooked, and like my time isn't as important as yours. And so I need us to sit down on Sundays and work on the schedule in a way that works for us both. That's not like saying like, you're a terrible father, you never do anything, and I will have people in my office say, if I say, well, what would it be like to talk to him about that? They'll be like, I could never say that. And not say what, like what part? And it's so extreme what they imagine saying. And again, to that 50% rule, you don't be extreme. Like, don't throw hand grenades unless you really, really have to, but you can say something, right? And I think sometimes there's a real binary between anything I can think of sounds really, really mean and way too difficult, the bad kind of difficult, or nothing, or I am silenced and I just like kind of let it ride and pretend it doesn't matter while actually I'm becoming quite resentful. And so I'm saying, be as neutral as you can, but clear. Be clear and say the hard thing.
Yeah, that's so great. Because I think there's sort of this pendulum swing, right? That we do where we're totally silent, perfect people pleasers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, or we're like exploding rage machines who are signing divorce papers, like, and the middle is what you're talking about, right? The middle where it's not that, A or B, like two ends of the extreme. There's something in the middle that's probably much more healthy and functional, right?
Yeah, yeah. And people can hear it. People can hear, I can't do soccer pickup every day of the week. You need to collaborate with me on figuring out a solution to that, more than you don't do anything for our family, right? Like you want to say things. You don't want to sugarcoat too much. You want to be clear, but you want to identify the problem and say it clearly without being super inflammatory necessarily. Yeah. So this is something that comes up all the time, and the first piece of either it's 0 or 100, I call this say nothing, freak out. Right. And I do think that's a little bit of the nervous system. Like finally you've had enough and it's like a volcano exploding. And then you end up apologizing, which is totally outrageous. And the main issue just kind of peters away because you overreacted. And that's a terrible, very unfair situation to be in.
Right. Because then the, partner's going to be like, well, that wasn't something that I really need to listen to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you talk about jealousy, regret, and resentment is sort of the red flags that maybe we need to pay attention to when we're coming up with our dread list. Yeah.
Yeah. So I call these the weather vane emotions, and I find them hugely valuable to know what's going on with us. And I think a lot of times we find these unattractive emotions, and so we really try to distance ourselves from them. But to me, they're the most hard emotions are actually our most important guides and advisors. And so absolutely, where am I feeling envious? Where am I feeling depressed? Where I'm like, what are my hard emotions trying to tell me?
Mm. Yeah, I work a lot with empaths, and I wrote a book called Energy Healing for Empaths. And in that book, I talk about resentment as the red flag. So I asked my students to do a resentment inventory and to talk about, as write down everything you feel resentful about as an indicator of where we're overgiving in relationships, because I think resentment is how we feel when we're chronically giving more than we're getting back in our relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. I good one. You're like that. We're crossing our own boundaries. We're not holding our own boundary about what's fair to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And one of the things that you suggest, you talked about it sort of briefly, was the weekly meeting, right? The weekly connecting point for couples. What's that about?
I believe in setting expectations ahead of time as opposed to being angry about what happened afterwards. And in the old social work adages, strike while the iron is cold, right? Don't wait until everyone's all fired up. And that in most family systems, there's just too much going on. And so to sit down with your partner and to go through everything, every area of your life that's dicey for you ahead of time. So on, say, Sundays, you put a cartoon on for the kids, you each grab your coffee. And with my husband, we would do calendar, which was our biggest thing. And it's what I find the hardest for a lot of couples, because anything new often comes through the mom's schedule. And then it's like she's the only one responsible for it, which it's not fair. Money, it can be, if there's any issues around money, talk about it every week. Communication can really diffuse so many of these issues. And then in our case, and I think this is a little bit unusual, we used to open the mail together, because what I felt happened is I got the mail and then I'd open it. And again, then somehow that was on my plate. it wasn't shared. And so I don't want all the mail on my plate. I don't want to be the administrative.
I hate mail. I don't like.
I only get it like once a week. But I hate mail.
Mail is stressful.
Yes, completely. Yeah. So during a
That's funny.
weekly meeting, we can maybe head off some of these problems, and a partner who loves you is going to be willing to implement these strategies to make you happier. And if you're with a partner who doesn't care about your happiness, again, that's very
Good
important
data point.
information to have. Good
Yeah.
data point. Yeah.
Wow. So such good stuff. So Tonya, if people wanted to work with you or reach you or read your book, how would they go about finding you?
I am on Instagram, so Tonya Lester Psychotherapy. They could find me there, but my best place is my website, which is tonyalester.com. And there's a book page on there, and they could reach out to me through that. That would be good. The best way.
Great. And your books for sale, I would imagine all the places you can buy books.
Everywhere. Yeah, it's everywhere.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Tonya, thank you so much for being on the show. Such great information. I'm going to read this book cover to cover, and then I'm going to give it to my sister.
Oh, I love that. Good.
And I so encourage everybody who feels touched by this or intrigued by this to go out and get that. Are you still working in your private practice?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll always work in private practice. That's my passion.
Yeah, that's your thing. Yeah, that's great. So, and do you work with people remotely too, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So if you feel like those of you who are listening feel like that's something that you want to do, just hop over to Tonya's website and check out her work and her availability. And if you want to find me, you can find me at lisacampion.com. I work with emerging psychics, healers, and empaths to help them step into their gifts, because I really think the world needs all the healers it can get. And I'm passionate about creating an army of healers that are going to go out and save the world.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's my thing. So thank you so much for being on the show with us, Tonya. And thank you all of you guys who are listening in as we are saving the planet one person at a time right here on the Empower channel.
Excellent. Thanks.